Power requires moral restraint. Unknown author. All right, good morning and welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad Podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I'm your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. All right, folks, let's get into this. First and foremost, got a comment in the chat that I'll address here real quick. Hey, it said, hey, your start time on YouTube said 7:16. I'm not sure what's happening there. I set it up, through Rumble and said 7:30. According to Rumble, it was like, you're going to start at 7:30. Yes, I know. I'm a little bit late. I was having a technical difficulty with Rumble. I went to start the stream a few minutes ago, and it was like, sorry, have a problem. And I was like, no. And I clicked start stream, and it was like, yes. And I was like, oh, boy. Because I was like, I'm not really sure how to handle this. And so then I literally just exited the screen that I was on, restarted it, and then everything was fine. So I don't know what's going on with those two particular issues, why the YouTube stream said 7:16. But if you're watching from YouTube and you happen to see that it says like 7:16 or something, more like 99% of the time, that's not going to be correct. Almost 100% for a couple of reasons. Number one, if I start the show early, then that's going to be a rare situation. I'm going to start it on like a 5 or a 0, right? Like 7:15, 7:20, something like that. I'm not going to start it at some weird number like 7:16. So if you see that, just know that there's some weird glitch or error that I don't have control over. But more than likely, you can expect that I'm not going to start this show until 7:30. And for those of you who know me, perhaps maybe a few minutes after that. So there's that. And then again, apologies for the show being a little bit delayed this morning. Rumble just was not cooperating. I don't really know what happened. Probably just it like timed out or something like that. You know, like when you're, you know how like when you're logged into your bank, and then you don't do anything for a while, and it's like, oh, you must not be here. Maybe it's something like that. I don't really know. So anyway, we're good to go. Let's see here. Your volume is really low, much lower than the entrance music. I don't know. Let's see here. Like as far as I can tell, everything here is good. You can tell me if that makes it any better. I don't know. Everything, all the settings here show me as good. So if there's an audio issue, I apologize. I don't know. I'm not sure what to say, but this is what it is. Let me check here. I'm looking. All right. So it's live. Okay. So we're good there. Okay. So as far as I can tell, everything is in order. And if the audio is especially bad, then maybe I can do an upload later. So we'll see. But I'll make sure I get my face right up to the microphone here so that you guys can hear me. Okay, so what do we got for today? I'm going to talk about 3 things. You know, it's funny. I usually label these as like random dad musings. And the idea behind it is that I'm kind of talking about things that maybe aren't really all that connected. But oftentimes, I realized this morning, oftentimes they kind of are connected. You know, it's not like I've necessarily looked and said, hey, this, and this all share something in common. Let me talk about all 3 of these. What I usually do is I just say, I'm going to talk about this, I'm going to talk about this, and I'm going to talk about this. And then it turns out that there is some kind of a connection to them. So today I'm going to talk about kind of like how we see things in the world, our worldview in a sense, and how we approach them. That's going to be the gist of that's going to underlie everything that I talk about today. All right. Part of it's going to include just kind of like our perception. Part of it will include like, are we making a good argument? You know, and ultimately at the end of the day, it all leads to how do we behave going forward? You know, one of the things that I really try to do is I try to think about my actions in the past, and then I will, I will evaluate them. And then sometimes I come to the conclusion like, yeah, that wasn't good. And then I might say, but why? And then I'll say, okay, well, it's not good because of this reason and this reason. So therefore, going forward, here's how I'm going to change this. Here's how I'm going to do it differently the next time. And so, it's not just, oh, go beat yourself up. You did this so poorly. It's like you evaluate for the purposes of doing better in the future, for being better. Because as humans, we are all prone to failure, and we should always be evaluating all of our actions, all of our decisions, so that the next time around, we can do better, right? So let's get into this first one. Randy Fine. Now I don't like Randy Fine at all. Like, I have no love for this man. And you might think, oh, dude, you're just like one of those reply guys. It just, one, he shows up in my feed, and I'm pretty lazy. I don't curate my feed very well. I just will see things, and then I'll comment as I think I have something to say. And, of course, the algorithm works against you in that sense, because then it's like, you click on a profile or you click on a comment, and they're like, oh, you like stuff from this user? Let me show you 12 more of their posts. And you're like, okay, it was like I was just looking, to see what they had to say. That doesn't necessarily mean all of a sudden I want to see all of their stuff, but that's the internet we live in. Anyway, so I see a lot of Randy Fine stuff. He is the Congress member right below me, in the district below me. And so I don't quite have a vested interest. I'm not his constituent. However, he is a member of Congress. And for that, I'm like, well, if I comment a lot about him, then fine, so be it. And it turns out he gives a lot to comment on. So here's this comment that he said, that he made just recently. The Associated Press, they had an article that they came out with. I'll show it to you in a moment here. They tweeted, they said, survivors of Israel's pager attack on Hezbollah struggle to recover. And they had a link. And then he said, good. And I'm just like, dude, this, it's amazing how, I'm going to move this down just a little bit because it's like, feels really awkward. It's amazing that Randy Fine seems to be very comfortable saying some vicious things about people he dislikes. And I support that in the sense that he has the freedom of speech to do so. Okay, so I would never take that away, no matter how vile I think what his comments are. However, he is a representative of the people, right? And so I look at it and I say, I want better than that from representatives. So as far as I'm concerned, he can be removed from office. He doesn't have a right to be in office, right? The American people can say, we want you in office, we don't want you in office. And part of the reason that I comment a lot is so that hopefully people will start getting the picture. This is not a man we should want in office. We should want somebody better. Now, what's wrong with this comment here? Well, let's break this down a little bit. Before I read the AP article, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to read a couple snippets. I want to make it very, very clear. I am in no way defending Hezbollah. So if anybody comes at me like that, if anybody says it later, they're like, oh, this dude was defending Hezbollah. You're a moron, and you don't deserve any more attention. Plain and simple. I've made it very clear. I'm also not necessarily objecting to Israel's pager operation. What I'm commenting on, just like I mentioned, is how I expect a U.S. representative to talk about various events. In this particular one, it is a horrific. It's the horrific nature of violence. Be it an all-out war or attacks back and forth. So let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at this AP article, and let's see here. There we go. Click the right buttons here. All right, there we are. Okay, so here's the article, and it starts off and it says, "Please note the story contains images of children and adults who suffered severe injuries when a wave of remotely triggered explosions hit pagers and walkie-talkies in Lebanon and Syria in September of 2024 as part of an Israeli operation against the Hezbollah militant group." Okay, so you might remember there was all these, jokes and whatever about pagers going off, and so what Israel did, they infiltrated the supply chain, and they were able to replace pagers with, standard pagers with pagers that had explosives in them and could be remotely detonated by Israel. And then I believe they did the same thing with walkie-talkies. So let's go down here. I'm going to click on where's my, there we go. We'll just jump right over to my highlight. Well, thought we did. Did we not? Okay, I guess I'll have to scroll down. I don't want to read the whole thing. There were just a couple parts in here that I thought were interesting. And where did they go? There we go. Okay, so here's the first item. It said the pager attack was stunning in its scope. It wounded more than 3,000 people and killed 12, including 2 children. Okay? So when I say violence is horrific, that's not necessarily a judgment of you shouldn't do it. If somebody breaks into your house and you kill them, let's say you shoot them and you happen to get a headshot, okay? That's violence. That's horrific. It's also appropriate. So we have to be careful when we're having these kind of conversations. We can acknowledge that violence is horrific. I talked about this the other day when I was talking about the man that got pulled over here in Jacksonville, and then he released his video cam, and then we saw, the video footage from the officers that they were wearing. So, and when we piece that all together, we kind of get a different picture. But one of the things that came out of that was when the Jacksonville sheriff, when he came out, and when TK Waters came out, and he said, and he was talking about this incident, he said, violence is always ugly. And it is. It's always ugly. So we should always treat it as always ugly. So this is my first problem with Randy Fine. He's like, good. Like, it's almost celebratory. I'm not going to celebrate in violence. I think we can do better than that. Then we go down here to this other one, this other highlight. Hezbollah, also a major Shiite political party with a wide network of social institutions, has acknowledged that most of the wounded and killed were its fighters or personnel. Okay. Now, I don't think there's much of an argument to make that Hezbollah is anything other than a terrorist organization. They may perform other functions that those functions are in themselves not necessarily terrorist activities, because you've got Hezbollah is part of the government, and shut up, libertarians. I know what you're going to say. But, most people don't consider just a standard, regular, everyday government necessarily in itself a terrorist. Particular governments might be, they might aid in it, but just, the function of being in government is in itself not terrorism. Okay? And then I think they also do some good work, in Lebanon and, wherever they operate. But again, just because you do some good things doesn't necessarily make you a good person. You can be an evil person toward everyone else and be the greatest dad in the world. Okay? Like, as far as your child is concerned. Okay? So those two things can exist at the same time. So I am talking about what I expect from U.S. representatives. When I look at this, if a U.S. representative were to say, hey, this pager attack mostly killed people who were Hezbollah and personnel, and, either they were terrorists themselves or they're supporting terrorists, that's a fair statement. Nothing wrong with that. Okay? It goes on to say the simultaneous explosions in populated areas, however, also wounded many civilians, like Jafal, who was one of 4 women along with 71 men who received medical treatment in Iran. Hezbollah won't say how many civilians were hurt, presumably because there's not very many, but says most were relatives of the group's personnel or workers in Hezbollah-linked institutions, including hospitals. When libertarians talk about blowback, this is what we're talking about. If your family member is blown up, chances are you will want revenge. You can go look it up. It's called terrorist math. The idea behind it is, when you go and if you kill a terrorist, okay, fine. But if you kill the terrorist family, well, then now other family might actually be motivated, incentivized to become a terrorist themselves because they want revenge, right? Like, and it could be the case that they do it with the terrorist, but it's easier to become a terrorist when an innocent person or somebody who hasn't done anything wrong is harmed. Okay? So when we're talking about these kind of things, the real question ends up being, how should we discuss this? That's my concern when it comes to Randy Fine. It's not that he says, hey, if he came out and he said, let's imagine he said this. Let's imagine he supports the operation, which he does. We don't have to imagine. But let's imagine that he said this. Hezbollah is generally regarded as a terrorist organization. Okay? That they may perform other functions for which we might agree with does not change this. Okay? I agree there too. The pager attack was necessary, and Israel worked hard to target only members. It is unfortunate that civilians were caught in the middle or family members of Hezbollah fighters and personnel. As always, it is sad when children are harmed while adults are fighting. So imagine if Randy Fine had said something like that. He could have just said he could have summarized all of that by just simply saying, Hezbollah is generally regarded as a terrorist organization. The pager attack was necessary, and Israel worked hard to target only members. It is always sad when children are harmed while adults are fighting. He could have said that, and that would have been humane. It's not like I'm not wearing my heart on my sleeve. I'm just simply saying, let's take time to acknowledge that innocent people got harmed. If nothing else, even if you don't think older children, like 17, 18 years old, 16, 17, 18, if you don't think they're so innocent, at least children who are adolescents are innocent. They don't know any better. Yeah, maybe they've been taught, that maybe they've been raised to hate Jewish people. They're still innocent because, again, they don't know any better. And you cannot guarantee that they won't grow up and say, you know what? This is foolish. I reject it. It has happened. But more importantly, I place a high value on how we talk about violence. I don't enjoy it, but I recognize that sometimes it's necessary. I also recognize that anytime violence occurs, it is, as TK Waters said, ugly. And we need to keep that in mind. Otherwise, who are we becoming? That's my problem with Randy Fine. It's not that he supports the actions so much. I mean, now some actions I don't support, right? But he could, if he supported them and at least acknowledged that people that didn't need to be harmed got harmed, that would be far better than what he's doing now. So for that, I say he should be removed from office. And I take an aggressive stance. I say, and I don't mean it quite so literally, but I say he should be removed from office physically if necessary. The physically if necessary is added to kind of display a sense of urgency and importance, right? Like, not just like, oh, he should be removed from office next time we get a chance to vote. No, I mean, we should be demanding that he resign right now. That's what I'm looking for. So what next? So that's Randy Fine. So what next in my bag of tricks here? Well, we've got this we got this issue of ICE versus Penske. So let me show you this video of ICE. Well, first I'll show you an image, but there's a video of ICE that was going around, and they basically were exiting a Penske truck, Penske, the rental truck company, and so it's causing a lot of debate. So here's this image. Let's take a look. This is before the video that you're going to see in just a moment. So you can see that ICE here is loading up, and I could probably zoom in on that a little bit so it's a little bit more clear. Let's see here. Let's do this here. All right. There you go. All right. So you can see very clearly they're all in this Penske truck, right? They're gearing up. They're going to go get some illegals, okay? Here's the video, the accompanying video, for which caused a lot of controversy.
Now, I've been lucky because if I make up my...
That's the wrong video. Click the wrong one. All right. So they're hopping out. They're going to get him. Hoorah, right? Okay. So this prompted Penske to issue a statement. And this is where things really got crazy. Okay? So here's their statement. I'll read it to you just in case you can't see it. Penske Truck Rental is aware of recent reports and videos regarding a Department of Homeland Security operation in Los Angeles. Penske strictly prohibits the transportation of people in the cargo area of its vehicles under any circumstances. The company was not made aware that its trucks would be used in today's operation and did not authorize this. Penske will reach out to DHS and reinforce its policy to avoid improper use of its vehicles in the future. Okay? So you can imagine that made some people pretty angry. In fact, social media had a lot to say. Let's check out some of their comments. All right, so Will Chamberlain, who I actually criticized, he said, "Found a truck rental company I will never do business with." You know, it's really easy to say, I'm never going to do business and raise a storm. Were you getting ready to use Penske truck? Were you likely to use them, any more than you might have used U-Haul or some other trucking company? To me, I find this kind of absurd. It's really easy. And my criticism of him was like, dude, okay, so you're going to say you're not going to use Penske truck, but let's say Penske truck had said nothing, right? And then there was a backlash against them, and then they were hurting financially. Would Will come and say, well, because you did what I like, then I'm going to go and just rent a truck just to be renting it? Or, hey, here's a donation for your trouble to keep your business going, so you don't have to fire anybody. Is he going to do that? No, he's not. How can I say that? DL, how can you say you don't know what Will's going to do in the future? Because I'm an observer of human behavior. And time after time after time, I've seen that this doesn't really happen. It sometimes does if it really, really gets people's emotions. Like you had the pizza company a while back where I think a reporter walked in and kind of caught the cashier off guard, and they were like, there's a pizza shop, and they were like, it was during the whole bake the cake argument, and so this reporter went in and they were like, would this company, deliver pizzas to a gay wedding? And the girl was like, yeah, I don't think so. And then it caused, then they put it out there, it caused a lot of storm. People like, oh, you wouldn't serve gay people, blah, blah, blah. Nobody had considered, who orders pizza for a wedding in the first place, but whatever. And so there was this huge uproar, and then a lot of people were flocking to their Google to Google Maps to leave bad reviews. They left bad reviews on other sites, and so they were just creating havoc for this company. The company ended up closing their business for a few days, and then they ended up raising a bunch of money where people donated to them. Now, I can't remember exactly what the outcome of that company was. I think they might have shut down, but I can't remember. I could be wrong on that. But the point being is, that's rare. That generally doesn't happen. What usually happens is the company suffers a financial loss, and all the people who support that or would have objected if the company had said, we don't want to have anything to do with this, all those people, they just keep their wallets shut, right? They don't jump in and say, hey, you did a thing I like, I'm just gonna rent a truck and just drive around. They don't do that. That's not typically what happens. So to be honest with you, I don't care if Will, I don't care that Will says he's not going to use the truck rental company. What's the likelihood that he was planning on using a rental truck in the first place? Probably pretty low. So what does this amount to? Virtue signaling. That's what it amounts to. Who else? Let's see. Andrew here says, the funny thing about this pathetic statement is MS-13 has been using your trucks for human trafficking for years. I've got something for you on that. I'm going to hold my tongue on that one because I think that one's kind of funny. But a lot of people made this point in one way or another. Joe said, and just like that, 77 million people vowed to only use U-Haul. No, they didn't. You're just saying that because you're looking for attention, and it's not even meaningful attention. I'm cool with people looking for attention. That's kind of like the point of social media in the first place. But this is not meaningful. You're just like, because what he's referencing, of course, is like everybody that voted for Donald Trump is now not going to use Ryder truck. No, that's not. Most people probably aren't even that aware of it. Like, look, Twitter, social media, it's usually people that actually care about these things. Many other millions of people just go about their lives and they're like, whatever. What else? Oh, Super Journalist said, reminder, Penske only supports illegal aliens being transported in their rental trucks when they're being smuggled into and across the United States. So this is a funny statement because it's like they only support it. This is very binary thinking, right? These are the people that go, if you disagree with me, then you must support what I oppose. It's kind of, and it shows the mental retardation that shouldn't exist, but does exist because people have no critical thinking skills. I want you to think about this very, very carefully here, okay? Remember that you might have seen it, you might not have, but there was a comment that somebody made, and they were like, Twitter is the only place for which you could make a statement, and somebody will say something totally unrelated. And so the example they gave was like, somebody might say, I like waffles. And then somebody else might come along and go, oh, so you hate pancakes? And then the person responds and they're like, no, that's an entirely different sentence, an entirely different issue. That has nothing to do with what I said. Like, just because you like one thing or you don't like one thing doesn't mean the exact opposite for something else. You could not, it's almost like when people say, if I criticize a Republican, people will go, oh, what makes the Democrats so great? I'm like, nothing. I just haven't got to them yet because you interrupted. That's what. And they do the same thing with the other in the reverse, right? If I criticize a Democrat, like when I criticized Joe Biden, people would be like, people that supported Joe Biden, they would be like, oh, or Kamala Harris. They would say, oh, what's so good about Trump? And I would say, nothing. You just made an assumption, right? What's so good about you making an assumption? Nothing. You just make an ass out of you and me. That's all that happened. Let's see, what else? Crazy that Penske is such an anti-American brand. Well, that escalated, didn't it there, Nathan? We went from, hey, don't use our stuff in ways that we tell people not to use our stuff, and somehow now you're an anti-American. Penske is trying to block the deportation of rapists, MS-13 gang members, and other foreign criminals currently in our neighborhoods. Why would Penske take this very sick and unpopular position? You see what I mean? People just extrapolate like crazy. They go from, hey, don't use our stuff to, oh, you're anti-American? You support this? You want this? What? Where in that statement does it say that? This is a problem with critical thinking, and we should call it out because we're not going to get the best answers, the best solutions to real-world problems as long as we're allowing, idiocracy to run America. That's what this is. This is idiocracy. People are like, we're almost there. No, we are there. It's all over the internet. Penske doesn't want their trucks used in ICE operations. Don't give Penske a single dime. Don't rent a single one of their trucks. Show them that being unpatriotic doesn't pay. Okay. It is not unpatriotic to say, this is how we want our property to be used. This is part of the contract you agree to when you rent one of our vehicles. Please honor the contract. That is not unpatriotic. It is the opposite, actually, in a sense. If you're demanding that Penske just say, okay, no big deal, it was the government and they must be doing something good, You are saying their property doesn't matter, which, by the way, means your property doesn't matter. Okay? And you're also saying contracts, they're no big deal as long as it's the government. No, contracts matter. That's where and every libertarian should be angry about this. Even if they support the deportations, they should go, whoa, wait a minute. Private property, period. And Penske can say, I don't want you using our property for whatever reason they want. That should not be debatable. Penske hates Americans, noted. Okay, Jack, you're a moron, noted. Will, again, I'm seeing a lot of people saying that Penske is doing this for liability reasons. Nonsense. Every time you rent a car truck, you sign a contract. I like this. You sign a contract saying that you won't do stuff like this and expressly waiving liability, indemnifying if someone is injured via improper use of the vehicle. There's no way that this event could have somehow made Penske vulnerable to suit. So what Will is telling you that is that the government in no way would ever blame Penske. Can he really? Really? We've never seen a lawsuit that's frivolous? Ever? You sure, Will? Will, I think Will is a lawyer. Go ahead, tell me, Will. Tell me that you've never seen a frivolous lawsuit that is at a minimum wasted somebody's time, or at worst, they actually had to, people looked at it and we were like, why were they liable for that? There's no reason that, you should have expected hot coffee to pour on your lap, not to burn you. We've never seen a frivolous lawsuit, have we? That has had a major impact in our society. And when it's the government, well, they have a lot more power. Like if I go and I sue, I don't know, just imagine for a moment that I go through the drive-thru and, I've just, I don't know, some fast food joint and I order coffee and then I spill it on myself by accident and then I get mad and I say, hey, your coffee, it burnt me. You're liable for that, right? Just imagine something like that actually happened. And then imagine I filed a lawsuit and then I won and I won a big settlement. I know it's crazy to think that could ever happen. Now imagine if the government does it. What's the likelihood that the government will prevail compared to me, little old me, right? If I happen to get a good lawyer who makes a really good case, then my chances go up. But the lawyer basically, the government basically has lawyers. They have sharp lawyers, right? Not dumb ones. So their ability, just by the resources that they have available to them, to be able to pull this off is higher. Even if it doesn't happen, it's still possible. Let's see, what else? Coaster says, people, boycott Penske. They are a woke, anti-American company. Let's make them broke. Just think about this for a moment. Think about what we're doing to each other. We're literally tearing each other apart. We are saying, oh, if the government comes and wants to use your property and you say no, we will destroy our fellow Americans. What an immoral, horrible person this is. And anybody else who made this kind of a comment. Let's see, American artist, April, she says, why didn't you DEI hires make a statement when your trucks were caught being used for human smuggling, you disingenuous, un-American... we'll skip that word. Really? We're going to address that because I got something for you and everybody else. Looks like I crossed Penske off my list for an upcoming move transfer. Right. Okay. Do that then. So what? They're not obligated to engage with the government so that you'll do business with them, nor should they be. That should not be a standard that we hold. Okay? If they're actually doing something immoral, like if they had come out and said, we're okay with illegal immigrants, trafficking people, then yeah, you could probably make that argument. Not even probably, you could. But that's not what happened. So now what followed that? Well, a lot of people pointed this out. Let me put this image up on the screen here real quick. There we go. a lot of people pointed this out. And so this is an old article from back in 2023, I believe. And it says, border agents find 58 migrants crammed in a Penske truck in alleged human smuggling. Okay. And then an illegal immigrant from Mexico was arrested and faced federal human smuggling charges, according to Texas DPS. So a lot of people were pointing out, as you saw, and they were like, well, how come Penske didn't offer a statement for that? Why didn't you say anything there? Okay. A lot of criminals are known to not obey laws, much less contracts. Like Penske doesn't have to come out and say, when somebody who's doing something illegal, they don't have to come out and say, by the way, we object to you using our stuff illegally, Mr. Illegal Person who's engaging in constant illegal behavior. They don't have to. It's a bit of a given. And it's not the same as the government, who ostensibly is supposed to be doing things the right way. Ask any one of those people that are pushing back against Penske. Ask them if there is a situation where the government would do something that is illegal and harmful, and they would say, that's wrong, that's immoral, you shouldn't do that. You broke the law, we expect better of you. Every one of them would say yes. Now, we might disagree on, when is that time, but fundamentally, they will say, yes, we generally expect the government to obey the law. We expect the government to honor contracts. We expect the government in some way to kind of set the example. That is what our entire system of government is designed to do. It's designed to keep them from amassing too much power and allowing checks and balances by other parts of the government and the people itself to say, no, you overstepped, you were wrong. Our entire government is designed so that we can have an expectation that the government follows the law. And if we cannot expect the government to follow the law, then what the hell do we have a law for? We know criminals are going to break the law. We don't expect them to honor contracts. It would be nice if they did, but they don't. And we don't expect them to respect private property. But with the government, we do. We even have an amendment regarding private property that says soldiers cannot be quartered in people's houses. Why? Because it's your property. So I want you to think about this. Everybody that was like getting mad and they're like, you're un-American. You're telling on your own self, because you're telling me that you don't believe in the Third Amendment, which says the government cannot use its soldiers to come and quarter. Okay? So if they can't come into your home and use your house for their purposes, what makes you think that they have any more right to use Penske's trucks however they want against the will of Penske? They don't. It is the same issue. Yes, Penske should come out and say something, because Penske should come out and say, hey, you're supposed to be enforcing the law, not breaking it. But they did. And all these morons had a field day. Why didn't you say something about this? How about this? Here's the counterpoint. Criminals don't obey the laws or contracts. And that's the same point that was used to counter every single gun grabber. Gun grabbers will be like, oh, these criminals, we gotta put up a sign that says no guns allowed. And then everybody's like, that's a dumb idea. We could do that, but criminals who are going to go rob a bank, they're not going to be like, man, I was about to rob this bank, but then this bank said no guns allowed, and so therefore I had to obey that law. The counterpoint is literally criminals don't obey the laws. They don't obey contracts. That's how that's how the same people who are pushing back against Penske, that's how they will defend their gun rights, rightfully so. But the argument applies no less to Penske and the Third Amendment than it does the Second Amendment. Okay? Criminals don't obey the laws. We don't need to come out with statements to say criminals don't obey the laws. But we should come out with statements and say, hey, the government should obey the law, and more importantly, they should respect private property. Because if the answer is, well, they're just performing a service, then and should we just say that ICE can demand to use your home for a stakeout? You're trying to have a family dinner, and ICE knocks on the door, and they're like, hey, we're going to be using your house for the next week, so go ahead and clear out. What? That's the same thing you're asking Penske to do. I mean, it's a little different because, one truck versus your home, but conceptually, it is the same issue. So, yeah, I have a problem with this. You should too. Okay? It's absolutely bonkers. It's insane to me that people would even begin to make such an argument. Now, let's address one last thing when it comes to Penske, okay? Because I want to show you something, and I think this is pretty interesting. Because a lot of people, they were curious about, hey, did you say anything about human trafficking? Did you? Like that was the argument. Where is it going here? Why are you? Let's see here. Let's pull this up so I can see it. All right, there we go. All right, perfect. Might need to adjust it a little bit. Nope, we're good, I think. I messed up my windows earlier, so bear with me as I try to get my windows back in order here. All right, so there we go. All right, bam, here we are. So if you go to Penske's Twitter page, if you go to their Twitter profile, and you search trafficking, look at what you find. Here's the first one from May 7th of this year. Today, we welcomed Truckers Against Trafficking and the Freedom Drivers Project to our campus, a mobile exhibit exposing human trafficking. With over 14,700 Penske drivers trained, we're proud to stand with TAT to build a mobile army of everyday heroes. Wait a minute, what? I thought Penske was all about human trafficking. That's what all these idiots online said, because Penske didn't want their trucks being used by the government for this particular purpose, so therefore they must support human trafficking, right? They didn't come out with a statement. Here's another one. Human trafficking affects over 50 million people globally and is a $236 billion criminal industry. Penske is proud to partner with TAT nonprofit, that's another account, to train our drivers to know the signs of human trafficking. They train their drivers to identify potential human trafficking, but they support it. That's what I was told, right? By all the geniuses online. Okay, maybe this is just maybe this was just one or two. Okay. Nope. Here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one. We're back in 2024 now. Yet another one and another one. Scroll down. Here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one. We're in 2023. Here's another one. 2022, 2021, 2021, 2020, 2020, all the way down here. August 31st of 2020. Since that moment, documented receipts of Penske working hard to fight against human trafficking. So now let me say this. Every one of you retarded idiots that are calling for Penske to lose their business because they're woke, they should go broke. What you're ultimately saying is that all the efforts that they have been putting forward in the last 5 years, 4.5, I guess roughly 4 to 4.5 years, all that effort should go away because you don't like a business decision that they made based on, hey, respect our private property, don't use our stuff this way. But you think it's okay to call for them to go under so that all the work that they've done against human trafficking also goes under. That's what you're calling for. Actions have consequences. And people, you better get it figured out because you're contributing to the problem. Go look and see if any other trucking company is doing as much work. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. I don't know. But let me ask you, do you want a company that has strived over and over and over for years to fight against human trafficking? They didn't have to do that. Do you want them to go under? Do you really want them to no longer be in play helping fight against human trafficking? Does human trafficking mean so little to you that you would prioritize government abuse of private property at that expense? Is that what you're telling me? Because that's what I'm hearing. So you can go and kick rocks. That's the nicest way I can say it. This is unacceptable. You want to talk about un-American? Demanding a company go out of business because they didn't make a political choice that you approve of. That's un-American. Every one of you are telling on yourselves. No, I support Penske, like verbally. I'm not going to go make a big show of it because I'm not planning to move, right? And I don't particularly think that's a useful thing to do. You almost will never hear me say, like, I'm never doing business with this company again. Because half the time I don't believe people, like people will go, oh, I'm not going to do business at Walmart. And then they probably end up going to Walmart. I mean, there are some people that hold to it, but at the end of the day, it's a lot harder to do it. It's a lot easier said than done. But at the end of the day, I'm going to support them. I'm going to raise my voice and say, no, I'm going to push back because I want them to keep fighting against human trafficking. I think that's wonderful. And I don't think that they should have to come out and say, hey, people doing illegal stuff, you better start honoring our contracts or we're not going to let you use our stuff. I mean, when the government comes to rent a truck, I presume that the government came in and said, we are the government, we're using your trucks. Now, it's possible that somebody rented it more privately and maybe you just used a government credit card, or perhaps they're going to, submit an expense report. And so maybe Penske was unaware the whole time. I don't know. It's not clear how this all played out. But the likelihood is, that Penske didn't know at least what they were planning to use it for. And it's not like you could make the argument and say, well, if DHS walks into your building and says, we're trying to use one of your trucks, you probably have a good idea. But we don't know that yet. Okay? So until more information comes out, I'm going to side with Penske. You should too, if you love America. I hate saying that, but I'm just going to say it because, that seems to be popular now. All right, let's check out some comments and let's see what you guys are saying around here. Let's see here. Oh, look at that. There's no comments in here. It must be nobody's watching. No, I'm just kidding. Some people are watching. Maybe you just didn't have any comments. That's cool. All right. So in that case, we will go to intermission. We'll come back, and then we're going to talk about Hiroshima and Nagasaki because I got some thoughts on that. So here you go.
What's up, Solutionaries? Maj 2 right here, founder of Black Guns Matter and the Solutionary Center. We offer basic firearms classes, conflict resolution, and a whole host of other skill sets that are beneficial to our communities all around America. We're able to do these classes because of your voluntary donations. We don't accept government funds. The people that choose to pay it forward to remove the financial barrier to entry are choosing to do so voluntarily. So you can support at givesendgo.com/solutionary. Give it whatever level you can afford to do. Repost the content. Let folks know that we have a community to save and we have to do it ourselves together. givesendgo.com/solutionary. Be safe, be solutionary.
Hey, Liberty fam, do me a favor. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button to my channel. And for the really serious folks out there, I want you to hit that bell so that you never miss an episode. By the way, if you want to support the show, head over to libertydad.locals.com and sign up. For $5, you can be part of this show. There, I'll engage supporters of the show. We'll discuss topics that you want me to talk about, response videos that you would like to see, or anything related to the show. And I'll even have a monthly subscribers only episode. By the way, I'm always looking for dads to join me for Dad Talk. That's my series where I invite everyday dads on to talk about what's important to them in the context of being a dad. No argument, no debate, and dads choose the topic. It's my way of raising dad voices. If you're a dad or you know a dad who has something to say, let's get connected. Episodes air live on Friday mornings or Friday evenings, whichever works best for dads. All right, let's get back to the show. All right, so I want to point out, if you go to blackgunsmatter.com, you can, and I'll put a referral link in the show notes here after the show. But if you go to blackgunsmatter.com, you can use my name, Liberty Dad, for 10% off. Okay, so go there when you're check out the different T-shirts and the different stuff that they have. You get 10% off. I get a cut. So support Maj, support Black Guns Matter, support Liberty Dad podcast. All right, let's talk about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Yesterday was the 80th anniversary. Hiroshima was bombed on August 6, 1945. Nagasaki, August 9th, 3 days later, also 1945. Now, here's what a lot of people will point out. They'll dive into the historical evidence and they'll say, well, based on, all these, all these quotes from people, Japan, we didn't need to do that. Japan would have likely surrendered. Here's all these high level people at the time who also opposed it, so on and so forth. I'm not going to get into the historical, there's a lot of other people who are way better, way more knowledgeable about this stuff that can defend it much better than I can. However, that doesn't mean that I don't have anything to say about it. And so I want to make 3 points. So when you're reading, the history and you're determining whether or not Japan would have surrendered or would they not have, was there an alternative, for instance, would our air dominance have forced them, eventually to surrender? Did Russia really need to get involved? All that. When you're reading all of that, I want you to keep these 3 thoughts in mind. Number one, and I've talked about this multiple times. Number one, resulting. A lot of people do resulting. I've talked about this all the time. Resulting is when where somebody defends or criticizes a decision based on the outcome. So a lot of people will go, well, we bombed Japan and we're best friends now. It's not really an argument, actually, because when we bombed Japan at the time, we couldn't know what the relationship would turn out to be like. Sure, they may have ended up surrendering. They could have also said, we're not doing business with the United States anymore. We'll stick to our own selves over here. They could have done any number of things. And they could have said, we're not sharing, you can't build any military bases over here. They could have just been like, look, leave us alone. Go away, right? They could have done that. They didn't. But you didn't know what they were going to do. They could create lots of great tech and refuse to share it with us. They don't have to share what their knowledge of anything with us, right? They don't have to be cooperative. The only thing that they have to do is not attack us. That's it. So the idea that we can go later now today and say, well, they're we have a positive relationship with Japan. Okay, but you couldn't know that. It's resulting. It's no different than the guy who drives home 3 sheets to the wind and then later boast, well, I drive better when I'm drunk. It all ended well. Nobody got harmed. What are you complaining about? Because it was a bad idea, period. It's not a good idea because the outcome was positive. Because if that's the case, if that's how we judge, then anytime something is negative would then be considered a bad idea. But that's not true. You can make a decision and it could be a good decision objectively. And it could turn out positive and it can turn out negative. You can also make a bad decision, objectively a bad decision, and it can turn out positive. It can turn out negative, right? Like many people don't drive, they drive completely sober. And that is a good decision. And they still might get into a wreck, right? Do you see how this works? So no, I reject this idea that because of the relationship that we have with Japan today, that it was a good decision. That is poor critical thinking. And we could use a dose of better critical thinking these days. Second argument that I have, and this one I title this like civilian lives matter. more. So if you take war is hell and the arguments about collateral damage off the table, you realize that arguments defending the killing large numbers of civilians becomes increasingly difficult. That's because those are dismissive arguments. I'm sorry, dismissive statements, not arguments. Now, many argue that the alternative was invasion, which have cost many military lives. But I want you to think about something. What should be more important to protect in a war? Civilian lives or military lives? And you might say, well, it's really more important for the military, because if we don't have a military, we can't conquer the other people who have attacked us or who we've attacked or whatever, right? But I want you to think of it this way. If civilian lives mean so little in war, then what exactly are soldiers fighting for? Think about it. Like, if we say, well, we bombed them and we killed about 140,000 civilians, which is approximately how many we killed in Hiroshima. About 140,000 people were killed. Now, let's say they had a nuclear bomb and they returned fire and they killed 140,000 of our people. Then what would we have done? We would have sent over more nukes, right? And then we could have been a nuking contest. Now we have to do a little hypothetical here, right? I get it. But what is the outcome if they had responded? I mean, you've already escalated to nuclear bomb. There's no other escalation other than more nuclear bombs. It's not like you got like a different bomb that you're like, okay, if this one doesn't work, then we're going to use this bigger bomb. And that'll totally get them to realize. No, then you just have to use more of them, right? Because now, like if they had, and again, I'm not suggesting that they had a nuclear bomb. I'm just saying if they had, and this is the whole point of the nuclear threat, right? This is how it works. We all try not to use the nuclear bombs because we know if countries that have nuclear bombs start nuking each other, eventually nobody's left. It's the same principle. So what we're saying is that civilian lives just don't matter. But ask any soldier, why are you fighting? I'm fighting for my family at home. Now, maybe they're not really, maybe they're involved in a conflict that has no threat to their family. But the idea is that I am fighting for my family. Maybe I'm fighting for somebody else's family, right? So like if country invades another country and we send over troops and you ask our troops, what are you fighting for? They're going to be like, the people that were invaded. The people are civilians. So if we don't elevate civilian lives, what are soldiers fighting for? Or what do they think they're fighting for my libertarian peers who would argue that most of these wars were not even about liberty or anything that we believe they are about, which is fine. But the question still stands in one form or another. What are you fighting for? What are you fighting for that as you perceive? If civilian lives matter so little, we're literally only fighting to see which army gets to remain standing. And I think that's a very despotic way to look at things. I don't want to look at things like that. I would rather that our soldiers fight for something, humanity, for civilians, and keep that in mind on both sides, or all sides if you have, a multi-country conflict. Now, will civilians sometimes die? Yes. But I don't think that should be part of our argument. We should look at it and we should say, civilian lives are important. We are going to do everything we possibly can not to kill one single civilian, right? And if we can see that somebody is making that kind of effort, then I think it makes the argument from libertarians a bit harder. If you kill 70,000 civilians, my argument becomes a little bit easier. If you kill 10 civilians, in a major conflict, and you only, let's say you kill 100,000 soldiers, combatants, but then you only kill 10 civilians, you've just made my argument a lot more difficult to make because it's only 10. Now, 10 matters. I believe 10 matters. Okay? Let me point this out to you. if you're a Christian, I think you should absolutely be anti-war. That doesn't mean that we never have there's never a situation where war is necessary. That doesn't mean that we can't respond in kind if somebody attacks us. We cannot defend her. That's not what I'm saying. When I say anti-war, what I mean is I will do everything I can to either prevent a war or to bring a war to its end. And in the process, I'm going to do my best to not kill innocent civilians, women and children. Okay? I think every Christian should absolutely hold that position. Now, I'm not Christian myself, and I know Christians get really uppity when you start critiquing them and saying, I think Christians ought to this and that. Let me give you a little bit of a story here. It's not even a story. It's something Christians believe in. Okay? Sodom and Gomorrah. He was like, I'm going to destroy this place. I'm going to destroy Sodom. And Abraham, he was like, he went in on behalf. And he said, all right, God, if I can find 50 righteous people, will you spare the whole city? God says, all right, fine. If you find 50. I don't remember the exact numbers, but he goes down and he's like, well, how about 40? God says, okay, if you find 40 righteous people, right? Think of the righteous people as equivalent to innocent civilians. It's not really the same, but kind of, right? Like we're going after the guys that are trying to shoot at us, trying to harm us. That's not innocent civilians. So kind of the same thing. So then he continues on. He gets it down till he gets to 10. He's like, look, if I can find 10 people that are righteous, will you spare Sodom? It would basically be the same as saying, if I can find 50 good Japanese people, will you not bomb them with a nuke? And then imagine the president's like, okay, well, I won't make that call if you can find 50 people that are opposed to the war, that do not support Japan's, war efforts right now. And then imagine if I said, well, how about 40? And then the president's like, okay, driving a hard bargain, but yeah, I'll do 40. And then let's say I get down to 10 and I say, will you spare Hiroshima and Nagasaki if I can find 10 people that oppose this war effort? And then imagine the president's like, you know what? You're a tough negotiator, but if you can find 10 Japanese people that oppose the war effort, we will not bomb them with a nuke. It's basically the same concept. So in my opinion, America, many who believe is a Christian nation, I don't, but many do, I think you should take a lesson from your own religious beliefs. You should also be anti-war, and you should apply that in every single conflict. Because otherwise, again, what are we fighting for? My third and final argument against bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki that does not rely on history. Lore versus myth. The American lore is that Americans face the odds and pull off the impossible. Now, there are stories of that actually happening. And in some cases, we develop stories that, are an exaggeration, but they make that point. An America that is worth the lore is one that maintains the highest respect for life and death in all situations above and beyond any other country. To defend the nuking of Japan is to defend the quote-unquote easy solution. The horrific human cost leaves future generations with nothing to be proud of. I want you to think about this. I cannot walk around and go, man, my government made an amazing decision in bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki. No, because I would sound like a monster. I'm basically saying 140,000 people didn't matter. That's what I'd be saying. That's a horrible thing to say. There's no way that you can walk around respectably and kind of hold your chin up high and say, this was an objectively good thing. Now, some people might argue and say it was the right thing, it was the necessary thing. Maybe not right, but necessary thing. But that's not something you can walk around and say, America is great because we bombed another country into submission and killed 140,000 civilians. That's not something we can boast about. Now, if America had said, all right, well, we have this option, we could bomb them, but then we said, That's an awful lot of people to kill. There's got to be a better way. And let's say that our government officials were having this debate. You had on one side the people who are like, this is the necessary path. And then other people say, no, that's not the right path. We can find a better way that kills fewer people, right? And then the people that are fighting against it, let's say they won out. And then now they're on the hook to find a solution. So now they're up against the impossible. And then they come up with a solution that doesn't kill that many people. Then we could go back and say, that is part of American history. I guess I am using American history a little bit, but that is part of the American lore that I can be proud of. When faced with this easy decision, hey, bomb them into submission, or this, a solution that we didn't even yet have. And we chose the solution that we didn't have at the risk of killing more of our own people. That would be American lore worth talking about. So we have to decide, do we want to be a great country now and forevermore, or however long we last, or do we just want to take the easy way out? Because as far as I'm concerned, as long as we keep defending atrocities, then our lore of American, beating the impossible, it just becomes a myth. So the last thing I want to show you is the video I accidentally played a moment ago. We're going to play this whole video here. And this is this is General Tibbets. Okay, so he's General Paul Tibbets. Tibbets, not Tiblets. He flew the Enola Gay that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. So I want you to hear what he had to say after the fact. Just listen in.
Now, I've been lucky because if I make up my mind I want to reject something, I can reject it, and I do that. So that was one of the things that I was faced with when, as you say, I was on my way to Target. But before that time, Tom, I was clearly convinced in my own mind, and I had people telling me how much property and lives that bomb would take when it exploded, because it was non-discriminatory. It took everything.
Okay, so he admits he knew it was going to just decimate. And it was going to decimate buildings, hospitals, women, children, dogs, everything. It wasn't just going to take out, because a lot of the arguments are, oh, well, Hiroshima was being used, for military purposes, which generally happens when countries go to war, right? The U.S. did similar. So he's basically pointing out, he's like, look, this is not just going to hit military targets. He knew this ahead of time. So listen to how he rationalizes it.
I made up my mind then that the morality of dropping that bomb was not my business.
Oh.
I was instructed to perform a military mission to drop the bomb, and that was the thing that I was going to do to the best of my ability. Morality, there is no such thing in warfare. I don't care whether you're dropping atom bombs or whether you're dropping 100-pound bombs, or you're shooting a rifle. You got to leave the moral issue out of it.
Oh. You know what that sounds like? That sounds like I was just following orders. That's the Nuremberg defense, which we reject. The Nazis tried to use that. They were like, we were just following orders, and we reject it. We were just following orders is I'm setting aside the morality of it. I'm leaving that to somebody else. That is exactly what that is. This man, going to make some people angry. He's not a hero. He's a monster, and he's no better than the Nazis. Perhaps even worse, because he killed 140,000 people with one device, one bomb. Nobody else single-handedly killed that many people. Nobody, to my knowledge. I mean, I could be wrong on the history on that. Correct me if I'm wrong, that's fine. 140, I mean, on our side, but I mean, no single person through their direct actions killed more people than him. He's a monster. He doesn't deserve any accolades. I'm sorry, but I'm not. Because, yes, morality does belong in war. When morality is taken out of war, that means anything goes. That means That means all of the things that we hear about in the Middle East, all the stories, true or not, about how, like, say, I don't know, Hamas decapitated babies, Israeli babies. Well, guess what? If morality is taken out of war, what makes that wrong? Nothing. Nothing makes it wrong if there's no morality in war. There has to be morality. There have to be lines you don't cross. And if there aren't, then anything goes, and it's literally a matter of who has more brute strength. That's what it comes down to. And when you say that, when you make that argument, you are saying that Israel and Hamas are completely equal. You are saying that Nazi Germany, America, Japan, and everybody else involved in the war were completely equal morally. They were all on the same moral footing. Unless you say, no, there are lines that we cannot cross. We will not cross. And we will reject any arguments in favor of them. The wholesale slaughter of people in Hiroshima and people in Nagasaki, that was immoral. Period. End of story. And he knew it. How did he know it? He just told you. He said, because if he had kept the morality to himself, if he had said, I think this is moral, I don't think he would have been able to do it. He had to set his mind aside and say, I'm like, I don't know for sure exactly. Okay? It's not 100% clear. But my read of his conversation says the only way he could pull that off is to defer the morality to somebody else so that he could ignore it and not deal with it. That's the only way. When you do that, you open the door for the worst atrocities possible because anything goes. That's how it is. So for me, I think it matters how we talk about different topics. You can support something and not be a ghoulish monster about it. You can support Israel and say, look, I think they're defending themselves against Hamas, and I wish that they would kill fewer civilians, and I'm going to keep pushing them to kill fewer and fewer and fewer. And I have said personally on this show, and I've said it online, kill Hamas. Don't care. I agree. Hamas, they're terrible, evil people. They're using their own citizens for human shields. They're slaughtering innocent people that are not combatants in Israel. They're doing all these other things. They're objectively evil people. But I want the people fighting them to also not become evil. I don't want, if America has to go to war with another country, I don't want us to become evil. And so the way that we talk about things, like Randy Fine when he says good, no, we shouldn't say good when we see that humans are suffering. We should have some respect for human life. And we should say, sometimes human life has to end. I mean, it always will end, but sometimes it has to end early at the hands of another human. I don't like it, but that's a reality. That's how we should treat this. Because when we don't, we become the monsters. All right, let's check out some comments here real quick, and then we'll head on out. Let's see here. I got to move this over here so that I can get you guys up on the screen with my cool new, let's see. What do we got here? Yes, Oddsman points out, free Dexter Taylor, an unjustly caged dad the news media, NPCs want to ignore. Yes, we should free Dexter Taylor. Dad up in New York, he was a gunsmith, made guns and parts for guns, just for his own benefit. Posted the information online, got raided. Now he's looking at living the rest of his life in jail. So definitely agree with that. Let's see what else. Yeah, this is a good point here. My VA lady points out Liberty Dad is so close to getting monetized on YouTube. He needs a little more watch hours. Put on an episode and walk away from your computer. Help D out DL out by doing this solid. Yes, please go back and watch some old episodes if you will. If you have to, just play them and walk away. Go do the dishes or the laundry or take a walk or whatever you want to do. I totally get it. Maybe you don't want to hear me that much, but give a brother a little bit of an assist here. You know, we're doing, and I'm going to be, I told you yesterday, on Tuesday, that we're going to be doing some things differently in light of the Rumble Creator Program, which I am now just kind of abandoning. I'm still using Rumble. I think the platform is good. I just don't like the details, the specifics when it comes to the program. So I'm doing something else, and I will start rolling out new ways of you supporting, so you can support me in multiple ways. Like I said earlier, you can go to Black Guns Matter, use the code LibertyDad to get 10% off, and I will be unveiling more things here in the future. So definitely do that. Let's see here. Keith says, war is for most of us not profitable. I agree. It is not profitable. Well, it is for the companies that are making all the bombs and all the bullets and everything else. Let's see here. Let's see, what else? Last comment was grayed out. I don't know why a comment was grayed out, but I don't see any grayed out comments here on my end, Keith. But I appreciate you commenting anyway. All right, folks, let's see. Do I have anything on the other socials? Looks like not. So we're going to head out for today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And hopefully the arguments that I've made, you found interesting and you found compelling, and you can use them in your everyday average life when you're talking about these topics. With that said, let's head on out of here. And until tomorrow. Thank you for watching. And I hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer my Rumble channel, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com, or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you are there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. Remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.